was found, but Alfred Dreyfus just happened to be Jewish. And he was found guilty, all right? Hey. Now, a lot of the people in France started screaming that the army was simply anti-Semitic. You guys need to be familiar with that term. Anti-Semites or anti-Semitic means you are against Jewish people, all right? So everyone started taking sides. The way it broke down is that a lot of the Catholics in France tended to be against Dreyfus, because a lot of times Catholics back then were against Jewish people. The army sided against Dreyfus, because they're the one who convicted him in the first place. People who are nationalistic, or in other words, like Republican, they supported a strong France, tended to support Dreyfus himself. Realist writers at the time supported Dreyfus, like Émile Zola, all right? That's why we have Émile Zola as an anchor person. Remember how we had him from the last chapter? He wrote a, not book, but like a paper called J'accuse, J''ACCUSE, I accuse is what that means, where he accused the state of going against Alfred Dreyfus just because he was Jewish, all right? Now later on, the conviction against him was overturned, but not before the whole country kind of took sides, all right? Okay, mass politics, next to that term you should put down, this is a term that means that more and more people got the right to vote, and therefore more and more people started taking part in politics, okay? There's proof for that. This period is between 1871 and 1914. In other words, between the creation of the German Empire and World War I. The largest voting class is the working class. And so more and more, they kept getting more rights. So for example, take a look at the issue of universal male suffrage. We already know that France achieved that in 1848. We should now know that Germany achieved that at the creation of the German Empire in 1871. And now we know as an anchor date that Britain acquired this right in the Third Reform Bill of 1884. That is an anchor date. That is the second Reform Bill that we now have for Britain. The first being 1832, when the middle class men got the right to vote. All right? And now that more and more men have the right to vote, women are going to start pushing for their right to vote. So in the late 19th century, you have the start of the women's suffrage movement. Many of the women who led this movement were from Britain, okay? The one I'm going to have here for an anchor person is Emmeline Pankhurst. You can simply put down she's the leader of the women's suffrage movement in Britain. And by now you guys should know the word suffrage refers to right to vote. There's no suffer in there. It's suffrage, all right? People are like, oh, because they're suffering because they didn't get the right to vote. No, it doesn't say suffer. It says suffrage, all right? Anyway, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. No, it doesn't. No. Anyhow. Oh, goodness. Moving right along. Oh my gosh. Is that for me? Then I just said, no, I should have about 60. That's all right. Excuse me. Great Britain. We talked in the early 19th century about how Britain had a two-party political system, all right? By the way, I mentioned this today in second block. Almost every other country in Europe developed a multi-party political system where they had more than two parties. Actually, having two political parties only, or at least main ones, creates more stability than if there are a ton. Okay, does that make sense? All right, because some people in this country like to sit back and say, gosh, I don't know, why do we only have two choices? Why? I understand why we don't have more. Well, because when you have more choices, then it divides the country more. Do you see that? All of a sudden, if there's 5 political parties, each one's going to get, 20% of the vote, right? 20, and then you never have one party that has the backing of a majority of the people in the country. Which means that if this political party wins with 22% of the vote, and every of the other 4 are kind of separated, then that means there are more people who didn't vote for the one that won, right? So there are more dissatisfied people than there are satisfied people. That's why a 2-party political system works better. Because that way you know that the one that wins, it's going to have the backing of at least about 51% of the people. That's more stable. All right? So Britain and ourselves are kind of the exception to the rule of everyone else. Even to this day, Italy, France, they tend to have more than just 2 political parties. All right? But Britain starts this 2-party system. In the early 19th century, we remember their names. The Conservatives were the Tories. The Liberals were the Whigs. But now, by the late 19th century, we dropped those terms, and we have simply the Conservatives and the Liberals. All right? Now, the Conservatives in the late 19th century, they're still the ones who are the aristocrats. All right? Even by now, the upper middle class. Remember, you should be able to tell me a year when the upper middle class begins to become more conservative.
1848?
That's right. With the radicalism and the revolutions of 1848, the middle of those revolutions is where the middle class left their liberal tendencies and they became more conservative. Why? They already had what they wanted. Okay? So by the time we're talking late 19th century, the Conservatives are now the aristocrats and the upper middle class. All right? The Conservative Party in Great Britain in the late 19th century was led by a prime minister by the name of Benjamin Disraeli. He is an anchor person. All right? And that's what you want to have down for him. Benjamin Disraeli is the leader of the Conservative Party in Great Britain in the late 19th century. All right? Even the Conservatives, though, are looking for the vote from the working class. This works to the benefit of the working class because when you have 2 parties trying to get their vote, they're going to get a lot of benefits. So it's you wouldn't think it, but it's the Conservatives who helped sign the Reform Bill of 1884, giving the right to vote to the working class. All right? They grant unions the right to form, the right to strike, so on and so forth. So by now, for France, the German state, and Britain, we should know when unions get the right to vote, when we get universal male suffrage. Got to know those things. Those actually come up on the AP test. All right? Okay. The Liberal Party, the other party, is led by William Gladstone in the late 19th century. He is an anchor person. All right? So the leader of the Liberal Party. The main issue that he raised was called the Home Rule Bill. So for William Gladstone as an anchor person, you do want to know that, all right? The Home Rule Bill refers to giving Ireland its independence, giving them home rule. Get it? Okay? So William Gladstone supported that. But a lot of other people did not. Even in Ireland, some people did not support that. Most of the people in Ireland who did not support home rule were people who lived in Northern Ireland, where there were still a lot of English aristocrats, all right? And so there was a civil war that developed in Ireland as a result of this. Those who did not want Ireland to have their own self-rule, again, number one, were English, but they were also Protestant, are called Ulsterites. That's the term you should know. It's right there on the sheet, okay? Ulsterites live in Northern Ireland. They're English and they're Protestant. They fought against the right of Ireland to have their independence. Okay? One more person I'm going to put on this list for Britain that's not there. is David Lloyd George. He's a liberal. He's an anchor person. He's a liberal. Who tried to pass the people's budget that would give more social security and social programs to the common people. All right?
What was it called?
The people's budget.
Is he a prime minister?
He is. He will, yeah. He will be by World War I anyway.
Did you get the drugs?
What's that?
Did you get the drugs?
I already took 2 pills.
Oh.
I got it's you guys ever use the Z-Pack?
Yeah. I broke it.
What's that?
No, antibiotic.
No,
Aspirin.
I hate these.
Yeah, you got one?
Yes. Physically eat it.
Because Liam prefers Tombstone to Lumalabis.
You didn't think of it.
Yeah.
Liam